Hi, and welcome to From Zero to One, an interactive podcast where we talk to founders, makers, and innovators to understand how they got from zero to one, from nothing to something. They will inspire us to create a better and more positive future. One of the first projects was a dating app for musicians, Meet Music, that brought me to San Francisco in 2011-2012, where I discovered this interesting place where a lot of like-minded people are actually meeting and trying to exchange crazy ideas about a better world and a different future. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm Hans Paul, CEO and co-founder at Speed Legal, and this is From Zero to One. Zero to One is an interactive podcast where we talk to founders of scaling and disruptive companies, and we have fun. First of all, why another podcast? We all have different podcasts from different topics. The reason why I wanted to start this podcast From Zero to One, of course the name comes from the Peter Thiel book Zero to One, which I really enjoyed the book. But for me, it's actually a very fast way to say companies who are going from nothing to go to having something. And of course the next step is from one to infinity to n, which is a totally different problem. So I'm very excited about creating new things and improving the things around me. And 0 to 1 is like a short version, like a motto of how we improve things and how we create a better world. And the reason why I started this is because being an entrepreneur myself, it's a lonely journey. If you have been there, you understand what I'm saying. There are a lot of ups and downs, of course, joyful moments and less happy moments. And eventually it's a long run. I'm creating this podcast and inviting guest speakers, founders, with the hope to connect with more like-minded people. So today I'm going to tell you a bit more about my story and then leave you with some thoughts for the next episode where we will have some guests. So my background is finance and economics. I started as a kid improving things around me, selling stuff, buying stuff with my brother. We both grew up in a pretty active family. My parents are consultants and we had fun with small things at the beginning. And then we grew up with some ideas of developing bigger companies. One of the first projects was a dating app for musicians, Meet Music, that brought me to San Francisco in 2011-2012, where I discovered this interesting place where a lot of like-minded people are actually meeting and trying to exchange crazy ideas about a better world and a different future. This idea, actually, Speed Legal, the company I'm working on right now, came about when I was in high school and a bit later as well when I was at university. I was working for my parents, both tax and legal consultants, as I mentioned before. I was doing a lot of contract review and contract preparation. The task was very tedious and time consuming. So I decided to automate that part of the job with some basic coding. But only when I went to San Francisco for my second time in 2018, that's where things started to take off. I met my co-founder at a hackathon, the Stanford Hackathon, and we created Speed Legal. At the beginning, it was called in a different way. Another problem that I found by taking part to different hackathons and startup weekends, and that's how I met my co-founder. Of course, getting exposed to these kind of events is the best way to hire as well team members. So hackathons, startup weekends, and one of the issues that I found is that people get very excited at those events, but then afterward, usually you lose the momentum, and sometimes paperwork is one of the issues. One of the investors told us once, great, you want this startup weekend, but now what's next? You need to come back to me with a shareholder agreement signed, and a shareholder agreement is a piece of paper where you decide the roles and the shares. He knew that was one of the most difficult things, one of the first milestones in order to create a team and therefore a startup. We thought, yes, of course, let's do it. But after a month, we didn't come up with a proper agreement, and therefore we didn't get the money and we didn't continue. So that's a proof that I thought, well, if that's such a hurdle to agree on something, let's try to make this process easier. And therefore we created a shareholder agreement enforced on the blockchain. We call it SHA SHA form from SHA 256, the encryption algorithm. And it was a simple type form where you fill out some information about who does what, the milestones to reach, and then once the milestones are reached, you will get the shares on the blockchain, first on the Ethereum blockchain. And we started with that, very excited. But then we found that 95% of startups in the US are actually using milestone time vesting, and for time there was not much need of a blockchain to agree that milestones are achieved. So we have been talking to a lot of lawyers and angel investors. At the time, we found another pain point, which is the legal due diligence. Legal due diligence is a process that takes long hours. Usually junior attorneys are employed in the task, you cannot make mistake, and you have a short amount of time to do it, a very short window. We started with that, with M&A legal due diligence, and we created Speed Legal, which is a platform, a SaaS platform that allows everyone to understand contracts in seconds and to close more transactions faster for those who are professionals, business and legal professionals. So we went through a couple of pivots, starting from law firms to real estate, and now we're focusing mostly on business professionals. So legal tech is a growing space, has been around actually for many years, more than 20 years, right? This is the right timing because of technology advancement, regulatory advancement as well. And I think the market is getting ready. It's like what fintech was 5 years ago. And what excites me the most about this industry are different things, but mostly three of them at this specific moment. One is, reading contracts is boring, it takes time, and there must be a better way of doing that, being that a picture, a video, or GIF. Second thing is, most of the time, it takes a lawyer or a professional to understand a contract. And that shouldn't be the case. And not everyone can afford a contract lawyer or an attorney itself. It can go up to $500 to $1,000 per hour in the Bay Area, for example, in San Francisco. So access to law and legal knowledge to everyone, that's the second thing. Third thing is the changing of the ecosystem in terms of remote working. And the pandemic accelerated this. 10 years ago, doing signing on paper would be like normal, of course, and signing on an e-signature provider would be something pretty new. Right now, e-signatures are pretty much a de facto standard, and I believe reading a contract and agreeing on a contract can be a much smoother process. Therefore, that's the third thing, basically adapting to a changing environment and having people to agree on something in a much easier and faster way. So this was the first episode. If you enjoyed, share it with your friends, founders, co-founders, aspiring founders. In the next series of events, we will have guest speakers, as mentioned, founders, and they will tell us about the specific technology they're using and the specific path. So the definition of one is different for each of us. Ideally, they describe it as product market fit, some traction, some numbers, some metrics. But we will learn from each entrepreneur and each founder how they got there and what's their one. So thank you again for listening today, and we'll see you at the next event. Thank you.